Let's get to our first topic of discussion this afternoon. The federal government is set to introduce tax identification, consolidation, and collaboration, that's a TICC, in the proposed economic stabilization bill set for submission to the National Assembly. Now, the introduction of the TICC initiative is part of government's plan to expand the tax base and widen the tax net and create a level playing field for businesses. The initiative are part of the 15 bills set for amendment as approved by the Federal Executive Council on Monday. The amendment will also allow for collaboration between the federal government and states to suspend certain taxes on small businesses and vulnerable population, such as road haulage levies, other charges on transportation of goods, business premises registration, animal trade, and production sales tax, bicycle, truck, canoe, wheelbarrow, and cart fees, shops, kiosks, and market taxes and levies. Let's get talking about this important development. And I have Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, who is the president, who is the chairman of the Presidential Committee of Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms. Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, good afternoon. It's really good to see you. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Tolu. It's good to be on your program.
Yes, I think I'd like to start this way, that the Economic Stabilization Bill, which has been approved by FEC, contains some recommendations of the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, that is your committee, and as part of the Accelerated Stability and Advancement Plan of Government. I'd like us to start with you giving us an overview of this document and understand what it really intends to achieve.
Yes, thank you very much. So as you rightly introduced the subject, the Federal Executive Council a couple of days ago approved the Economic Stabilization Bills, ESB, and the next step is for the bills to now go to the National Assembly for enactment. Essentially, you are also correct. These bills contain some of the recommendations by the Presidential Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms Committee set up by Mr. President. And those measures that are being proposed in those bills also are part of the Accelerated Stability and Advancement Plan of the government. Essentially, the stabilization bills are about 15 different laws being amended, and the overall policy objective for this bill is to help with economic stability in key areas, including complementing the work of the monetary authorities for inflation reduction and price stability, also to complement the work of the monetary authorities around ensuring that we can strengthen the Naira exchange rate, which is tied to so many things. So you can imagine if we're able to bring Naira to under 1,000 to the US dollar, it will address so many things, whether it's Band A electricity tariff you are talking about, whether it's about diesel or petrol price, even the amount of inflation that you see that is passed through because of FX would also moderate significantly. And there's also the objective of trying to enhance fiscal discipline within the public sector in terms of government agencies in particular, but also to be able to create more jobs, especially decent jobs. We saw the jobs numbers released yesterday by the Bureau of Statistics, and it shows that unemployment rate has increased. And many of us believe that even the method we use to calculate the unemployment rate in Nigeria, even though aligned with international standard, does not fully reflect the reality that we're dealing with. So the situation is actually more worse than the numbers are saying. And then one final objective is to try and promote export, particularly export of non-oil goods, but also services and intellectual property, so that we can diversify not only the economy, but the source of our foreign exchange receipts. So those are the broad objectives of those, the bills. you would, have followed the work of our committee, and you see a lot of our reforms and recommendations are being implemented in different ways. There are those that are being implemented through executive orders. There are those that are being implemented through regulation, like the withholding tax regulation that we got approved a couple of months ago. You've seen the waiver or suspension of import duties and VAT on materials relating to, food, manufacturing input, pharmaceutical. But this particular stabilization bill has a number of provisions. So the key changes that we are recommending to the various laws, including those that will help us to be able to stimulate employment generation, particularly for our younger population who are digital savvy, to be able to find jobs within the global value chain. In other words, if you have multinational companies anywhere in the world who are looking for people to hire to work for them remotely within their business process, they should be able to look in our direction in Nigeria. We've seen countries like Philippines making over $30 billion a year. Of course, the leader in that area is India, and they make over $200 billion, and Nigeria can't even boast of $1 billion. So we've identified those impediments where we are not as competitive as we should be, and we are seeking to remove them so that imagine we can get 1-2 million jobs for young people who are here in Nigeria, not relocating anywhere, and earning dollars on a monthly basis. Not only would that help them live their own families and their livelihood out of poverty, but also to earn foreign exchange that will further help us strengthen and stabilize the Naira. For export promotion, we are proposing in those bills zero rating, that is VAT, to be at 0% for export of, currently we have it for goods, but we don't have it for services. We're introducing it for services. We're also introducing it for intellectual property. In addition to that, when you bring in the proceeds of your exports, you allow the flexibility as to how to spend it rather than being restricted as to what you can do with it. Because we spoke to a number of exporters, and they are keeping their money abroad because they are not very comfortable with the regime that we have introduced or that is in existence as to how they must spend their money. We also have provisions in those bills to facilitate investment in the gas sector. Nigeria, oil and gas reserve is about 38% of the reserve in Africa, proven reserve. But over the past few years, we've only been able to attract about 5% of the investment coming into Africa. So which means investors are not looking in our direction as much as we would like to see. So we also have some incentives there to attract more of that investment to come to our country. In addition to, reforms to try and clean out some of the issues we have in the foreign exchange market. Like I said earlier on, to complement what the central bank is doing, so that not only should we have, convergence of rates, we want the Naira to recover and then to stabilize. That way we start attracting more investment, particularly foreign direct investment. We also have some provisions to help private sector employers get some tax relief if they increase the salaries of their staff, or they give them transport subsidy, or they give them wage awards, including those who hire more people at this time than they have done in the average for the past 3 years. They will get a relief for the additional number of employees that they hire. In addition to issues around fiscal discipline for government-owned enterprises and MDAs, as well as, I think this will interest many of our viewers, to suspend some what we call nuisance taxes, which are mostly imposed at the subnational level, including haulage taxes when you are moving goods from one point to another, including the one that is imposed on animal trade and produce sales tax, bicycle and truck and canoe, wheelbarrow, catfish, shop and kiosk and market taxes, and so on and so forth. So our recommendation in the bill is for those taxes to be suspended because we can't impose these laws on subnational. But we also think that we can find revenue like windfall for them from other areas of government revenue to compensate for whatever they're going to lose, with the ultimate objective that the Nigerian people will be the beneficiaries of these reforms. And also, we have a proposal to provide more funding to the student loan scheme so that the government can cover as many students as are indigent and need the funds to be able to carry on with their education. And finally, is the provision that we have around tax identification, consolidation, and collaboration, TICC, or you can call it TIC, which is really the way we want to be able to expand the tax base and widen the tax net to ensure that anyone who should be paying taxes after we've exempted the poorest people and the vulnerable population and small businesses, whoever is left that should pay taxes, will be able to find out if they are evading their taxes and be able to compel them to pay so that nobody is above the law. So these, in summary, are some of the key provisions that we have in the Economic Stabilization Bill.
Summary, it touches every aspect of it. But let me take you further. I think this is the handshake we've been talking about, expected from the fiscal side to complement what the central bank is doing. You mentioned that, and that seems to me to be very important. But I'm also thinking that, do we have the organized private sector, small businesses also, are they aware, are they carried along before all of this was put together? And what were their fears? And maybe did they have any challenges, or did they identify any issues during the session with them?
Excellent question, Tolu. So, we've been doing this, our reforms now, we've been on it for a little over 1 year. And from day one, we had involved the private sector significantly. Okay. So as part of the membership, not even just consulting with them, as part of the membership of the Presidential Committee, we have the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, we have the Lagos Chambers of Commerce and Industry, we have the NASME for the small businesses, and in addition to that, a few other private sector organizations, including the Nigeria Economist Summit Group. In addition to that, we have intentionally had further engagement with these various trade associations, including we had 2 sessions for just CFOs, the guys who deal with the numbers for companies in Nigeria. And we had over 300 companies represented, over 300. We've had a session for journalists, we've had for public analysts. And one thing we have done is to be very open and transparent with the Nigerian people, for them to understand that this reform is about making lives better for them, reducing the cost of doing business, and therefore improving the ability of our country to grow in an inclusive manner. So in summary and in response to your question, the answer is yes. The small businesses, large businesses are very much with us. We carry them along all the way. And to be honest, they're actually very excited. They have been asking us, when will your reforms be implemented? If they have any concerns at all, is the speed of implementation that they are concerned about.
Indeed, that's my next question. What are you thinking about implementation? Because now it's to be transmitted to the National Assembly, and we expect this to become law. So what are you thinking also around that? How soon do you see this? Yes, I was thinking along that line too.
Yeah, your thinking is right, Tolu. So, unfortunately, I wish this is something I can predict precisely, and I'll say to you in the next few days, maybe by this time next week, but I know it's not going to be that fast. The lawmakers will have to do their job. We do respect that. That's why you have a separation of power. Yeah. So the bills will be presented as executive bills, and then the lawmakers will go through. One thing we've also done is we've been engaging with the lawmakers. We were not waiting for this time to come. We had a retreat with the Senate. We had another one with the House of Representatives. So they're not going to receive anything that's entirely strange to them. They're familiar with some of the provisions. And I think that will be able to, that will help in fast-tracking the process of passing these bills into law. We expect that they will, of course, want to do public hearing, which is fantastic and is important. And we also encourage, all stakeholders, to pay attention to this, follow the development, and whoever needs to participate in the public hearing should show up. Hopefully, we are expecting that, within the next couple of weeks, we should be able to get these bills out of the National Assembly, by which time Mr. President will then have to sign, and then the implementation will commence. I'll say give and take, let's say another, 3 to 4 weeks for these things to kick off.
Okay, before I let you go, now, the entirety of your work, there's a lot you're doing, talking about this committee. What more are we looking at as we move on, especially from this committee? Because everyone is talking about your handshake, of course, to support the CBN.
Yeah, so you're right, it's a lot. I was also very delighted to hear the Vice President representing Mr. President at the UN General Assembly. I also particularly mentioned the work we're doing as part of the speech from Mr. President. So we know that there's a lot. It's resting on the work we've been given to do for our country. So we take it very seriously. And that's why we are very big on consultation and engagement and using data to inform our policy recommendations. So some of these things are being implemented, including the economic stabilization bill, are even our initial recommendations. So we are now at the stage where we've completed our critical reforms recommendations, and we are now driving the implementation of those reforms. So what people should expect from us would be that, for example, we are repealing over 90% of the more than 60 taxes that we have in Nigeria today. And whatever is left, we're harmonizing them to less than 10 taxes. We've drafted the bill for that. We also are repealing all our major tax laws and redrafting them. We have the drafts to keep them very simple, to remove ambiguity, to make them business friendly, and most importantly, to protect small businesses, nano businesses, and the vulnerable people. Because our data was very clear in that the burden of tax has been disproportionately on the poorest people and small businesses for a long time. We think it's time for them to take a break, and then for our system to be progressive, whether it's VAT you're talking about, whether it's personal income tax, where we have a proposal to reduce the amount of PAYE that the masses will pay, whether you're talking about companies' income tax, where we're planning to reduce the rate from 30% to 25%, and so on and so forth. So I think for us it's very exciting times ahead, and we can't wait for these implementations to start sooner rather than later.
Well, we'll keep a tab on activities as usual. I must thank you so much for your time. I've been speaking to the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Join me from Abuja. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you very much.
What a